When I was little, my mother used to iron her Sunday dress on Saturday nights, like she was pressing her whole life back into shape. I'd sit on the floor beside her, tracing the lace hem of whatever pastel color she'd chosen that week. Soft lilac, pale yellow, sometimes rose. The hiss of the iron and the faint smell of starch filled our tiny Baton Rouge house, mixing with gospel hums and the low buzz of the box fan. Now, 30 years later, I stood before that same closet, her closet, surrounded by all those dresses, still hanging in neat rows like women waiting for their turn to speak. My mother, Loretta Mae Janes, had passed 3 months ago, and I still hadn't brought myself to pack her things. Every dress carried a story, and I knew them all. The cream one she wore to my graduation, when she stood proud in the Louisiana heat, waving her church fan like a sword of joy. The navy one she wore the day Daddy left, her eyes burning but dry. And the white one, the one I hated most, that she wore the Sunday after she caught me in a lie that split our home in two. I reached out and touched the white fabric now, my fingertips grazing the collar. "You never did forgive me, did you, Mama?" I whispered. Behind me, the air conditioner rattled on, breaking the stillness. My own daughter, Alana, was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone and pretending not to listen. 17, stubborn, and full of that same fire I once had. The kind that could light a house or burn it down, depending on who you loved and how hard. "You talking to yourself again, Mama?" she called out. "Maybe," I said softly, closing the closet door. Sometimes that's the only way to get answers. Truth was, I hadn't been able to shake the feeling that my mother had left something unsaid, something heavy. There were letters in the bottom drawer of her dresser, letters I found tied in a silk ribbon. I hadn't read them yet. Maybe I was scared to. That night, after Alana went to bed, I sat by the dresser with only a lamp burning low. The letters were yellowed, delicate, addressed in my father's handwriting. I hadn't seen it in over 25 years. "Loretta Mae, if you're reading this, I need you to know what really happened that night." I froze. My breath caught. My father had left us when I was 12, and Mama never once spoke his name after. She said he'd betrayed the family. But as I read those first few lines, my chest tightened with something like doubt. He wasn't apologizing. He was explaining. And I realized, for the first time in my life, that maybe everything I'd been told about why he left wasn't true. I folded the letter back and placed it on the table. My reflection in the window looked like my mother's. Same eyes, same set of the jaw, same silence. But unlike her, I wasn't gonna live with unanswered questions. Tomorrow I'd go see Aunt Thelma, the only one still alive who'd been around back then, the one Mama never wanted me to visit, because if the truth was hiding in this family, I was done wearing Sunday dresses over it. When I pulled up to Aunt Thelma's house the next morning, the heat had already begun to rise from the Baton Rouge pavement like steam off a skillet. Her place sat on the far side of town, smaller than I remembered, its porch sagging just slightly, white paint peeling from the posts like old scabs. The hydrangeas she used to keep alive in milk jugs were wilted now, leaning over in surrender. I sat in the car a moment before getting out, clutching Mama's letters in a manila envelope on the passenger seat. My hands were slick with sweat, and my heart thudded hard. Not from fear exactly, but from the weight of knowing I was about to stir up something buried deep. When I knocked, it took a minute before I heard the creak of her walker against the hardwood. "Who's out there?" "It's me, Auntie Renee." The door opened, and there she was, Thelma James, 78, tiny as a sparrow, but sharp as ever. Her cocoa brown skin was a map of lines and memories, her gray hair pinned in tight curls, eyes hidden behind big round glasses that magnified her suspicion. "Lord have mercy. You look just like Loretta," she said, voice trembling somewhere between awe and regret. Except Loretta never wore her pain on her face. "I guess I didn't learn that part," I said softly. Inside, the house smelled of dust, fried okra, and the faint trace of mothballs. The TV in the corner buzzed with static gospel music, and the lace curtains glowed in the morning sun. We sat at her old oak table, and I slid the envelope across it. "I found these in Mama's dresser," I said. "They're from Daddy." Thelma's hand froze midair. She didn't even reach for it. "You shouldn't have opened that drawer, child." "Why not?" "Because some things your mama carried were meant to die with her." I leaned forward, voice low. "Well, they didn't. They're alive and loud in my head now. He said in one of these letters that he didn't leave because of what Mama said, that she
I hesitated. That she lied. Thelma's eyes flickered, and she shifted in her chair. Your daddy wasn't perfect, Renee, but Loretta did what she thought she had to. What do you mean? The old woman sighed, her voice barely a whisper. You think your mama hated that man? She loved him so much it tore her clean apart, but she couldn't let him ruin you too. Ruin me? I frowned. He left us. She said he ran off with another woman. Thelma looked away, toward the lace curtains fluttering. That's the story Loretta needed to tell, but it wasn't another woman he ran to. It was his brother. I blinked, thinking I'd misheard. His what? Thelma nodded slowly. James and your daddy had a falling out over money, over land that wasn't rightfully theirs. When the sheriff came asking questions, Loretta took the blame for hiding the deed, said she burned it herself. But truth is, your daddy was the one who forged it in the first place. He didn't run to no woman, Renee. He ran from the law. The room went still except for the soft hum of a ceiling fan. My stomach twisted. My father, a liar. My mother, a protector. And Mama kept that secret all her life, even when it broke her. Thelma nodded, eyes wet now. She told me once, let them think what they will. My baby don't need to carry her daddy's sins. I pressed my palm against my mouth. She lied to save me. Thelma's frail hand reached across the table, resting over mine. That's what mothers do, child. They burn their truth so their daughters can walk in clean shoes. I couldn't speak. For a long time, neither of us did. The letters between us felt heavier now, as if every page held both love and punishment. Finally, Thelma whispered, you gonna tell your girl? I looked out the window where the sunlight danced across the hydrangeas. Maybe one day, I said. But first, I need to forgive Mama for making me hate him. Thelma smiled weakly. And maybe forgive yourself for needing to know. When I left that house, the heat had thickened into afternoon. Cicadas buzzed like tiny warnings. I got into my car and sat still, gripping the steering wheel with trembling hands. In the rearview mirror, I caught my own reflection. Eyes like my mother's, jaw like my father's. Two halves of a story that never should have been split. And for the first time in months, I whispered, I forgive you, Mama. But forgiveness, I soon learned, wasn't the end of the story. It was just the part where the ghosts start to answer back.
I didn't sleep that night. The house was too quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ribs. I sat on Mama's old porch swing, the same one she used to rock me on when thunderstorms rattled the windows. It creaked under my weight, the chains moaning like they remembered more than I did. The air smelt like rain coming, thick and electric, heavy with the ghosts of magnolia blooms. The porch boards were old, uneven, and soft under my bare feet, and every time the wind brushed past, it felt like the house itself was breathing. I had Thelma's words ringing in my ears. He didn't run to no woman. He ran from the law. I thought about Daddy's smile in those old pictures, the way he used to lift me high in the air when I was little, calling me his baby girl with the fire eyes. How could a man who laughed like that have been so broken inside? Lightning flashed somewhere in the distance, followed by the low growl of thunder. And then, in that short slice of light, I saw something, a small section of floorboard near the far edge of the porch that didn't sit quite right, warped, a little higher than the rest. For a second, I thought maybe it had always been that way, but my gut, that quiet whisper a woman learns to trust after enough heartbreak, said otherwise. I got up, went inside, and grabbed Mama's old screwdriver from the drawer beside the stove. I knelt down, my heart thudding in my ears, and started to pry. The wood creaked like it didn't want to give up its secrets. Dust flew up, stinging my eyes. Then the board lifted. Not much, just enough for me to see the edge of something beneath. A tin box, small, rusted, dented on one corner. I stared at it for a long moment, hands trembling. Then I pulled it free and carried it inside, setting it on the kitchen table. The rain began outside, soft at first, then harder, the sky opening like it had been holding back tears. I hesitated before opening it, afraid of what might be inside, because I knew whatever truth was waiting for me in that box, it wouldn't be clean or easy. It never is. When I finally lifted the lid, the smell hit me first. Old paper, damp earth, and the faint scent of Mama's lavender soap. Inside were folded letters, yellowed with time, edges curled like dried petals. But there was something else too, a photograph. It was of Mama and Daddy. They stood side by side on this very porch, younger, smiling, the world still unbroken. Behind them was someone I didn't recognize at first, a man, tall, in a brown suit, standing just off to the side. And then I saw the eyes, my eyes. I flipped it over. In Mama's neat handwriting, faded but legible, Loretta James and baby girl, 1977. James, Daddy's brother. The air left my lungs. My knees went weak and I sank into the chair. The man I'd always thought was a stranger in that photo was my uncle. But Mama had written baby girl, not niece, not Renee. What did that mean? My mind spun. I reached for one of the letters. It was from Daddy, addressed to Mama, but never sent. Loretta, I'm sorry. You were right. The truth would destroy her. I can't stay and face what we did. Please don't let her hate me for it. Please don't let her find out the truth. Not about James, not about that night. I dropped the paper. My breath caught in my throat. Not about James. Not about that night. I couldn't barely think. My fingers shook as I unfolded another letter, this one in Mama's handwriting. I buried our sins where no one would look, beneath the porch where she first learned to walk. Maybe one day she'll understand why her father had to become a ghost. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out the thunder. What sins? What had they done? I ran outside, barefoot in the rain, kneeling where the board had been lifted, my hands pressed against the wet earth, as if I could feel the answers hidden beneath. The porch whispered again, not with words, but with memory, the sound of Mama's laughter, the hum of her voice singing, "His eye is on the sparrow," as she shelled peas in the summer heat. I realized then that this wasn't just about Daddy running or Mama lying. It was about something deeper, something the whole family had agreed to bury. Lightning cracked again and I looked up toward the heavens. "What did y'all do?" I whispered. The rain soaked me through, but I didn't care. I just sat there, staring at that dark patch of dirt under the porch, heart pounding, knowing I'd just unearthed the edge of something that could either heal me or break me forever. The storm didn't let up that night. It poured so hard the gutters overflowed. The kind of rain that feels personal, like heaven itself is trying to wash something away. I sat in the kitchen in my soaked clothes, the tin box beside me. Letters spread out like open wounds. Every word looked like it had been written with guilt instead of ink. Not about James, not about that night. The words looped through my mind like a hymn gone wrong. My chest hurt from the weight of it, from the fear that what I thought I knew about my family wasn't true at all. Around midnight, the phone rang. It startled me so bad I dropped my coffee mug and it shattered across the floor. When I picked up, it was Aunt Thelma. "You went looking where you shouldn't have, didn't you?" she said, her voice small but sharp, cutting through the static. I swallowed hard. There was a box under the porch. She didn't answer right away. I heard the soft wheeze of her breathing, the shuffle of fabric. Loretta told me she was going to hide it. Said one day, if you needed the truth, you'd find it, but I never thought you actually would. Why didn't she just tell me herself before she died? Why didn't she say anything? Because she couldn't, Thelma whispered. And now that you've opened that box, you deserve to know, but you better sit down, baby. This ain't no bedtime story. I sank into the chair, gripping the phone tight. You remember that land your granddaddy left behind? The acres by the river? She said. Yeah, Mama said it was worthless after the flood. Thelma let out a bitter laugh. Worthless? Lord, no. That land was gold. Developers wanted it. Banks wanted it. But it was deeded in your granddaddy's name, and when he passed, it should have gone to Loretta and James equally. Your daddy, he changed that. My stomach tightened.
He forged the papers? But here's the part Loretta never told no one. James didn't just go along with it. He planned it. Your daddy signed, but James drew it up. They thought they'd sell the land and split the money, but your mama found out. She was pregnant with you at the time. I closed my eyes. Rain hammered the roof, hard and fast. She went to the sheriff to report it, Thelma continued. But James begged her not to. Said he'd lose everything. Said he'd make it right. But when your daddy found out she'd gone to the law, he panicked. He and James met that night on the porch. Same porch you sitting on now. My grip on the phone tightened. What happened? Thelma's voice cracked. There was a fight about money, about you. Your daddy pushed James. He hit his head on the steps. Loretta came out screaming. But by the time the sheriff arrived, James was gone. My whole body went cold. Gone? You mean he wasn't dead, Renee, she said softly. Not then, but he ran. Your daddy took the blame. Said he'd handle it. Loretta helped him hide the truth. Said he'd gone missing. Said he'd left town. They buried the letters to keep the story straight. But Loretta never forgave herself. She swore she'd protect you from the truth of what kind of man your father really was. Tears spilled down my cheeks before I even realized I was crying. The rain outside was nothing compared to the storm inside me. So all this time, all this hate, and Daddy wasn't who I thought he was? No, but neither was your mama. She wasn't cold, baby. She was carrying a secret heavy enough to break any woman's back. I pressed my palm against my chest. She lived with that all these years, and she still tucked me in every night like nothing was wrong. That's what love does. It don't always look pretty, but it'll bleed itself dry to protect what matters. We sat in silence for a moment. The sound of rain filled the space between us, thick and endless. Then Thelma said quietly, if you really want to understand, go down to the river. There's a marker there under the old oak. Your mama visited it every spring. When the call ended, I sat there in the dim kitchen, letters spread out around me, tears falling onto the pages. The lightning flashed again, lighting up the walls, and for a split second, I could swear I saw Mama's reflection in the window, looking right at me. Not angry, not sad, just tired. I stood, trembling, and whispered, I'll go, Mama. I'll find what you couldn't tell me. The storm began to die down then, softening to a drizzle, as if the sky itself was exhaling. I gathered the letters, placed them back into the tin box, and set it on the counter. Tomorrow I'd go to the river. Tomorrow I'd dig deeper, not into dirt this time, but into memory, because I knew now the porch didn't just hold family secrets. It held ghosts waiting to be set free.
The morning after the storm, the world felt washed clean, but I didn't. I woke to the smell of damp earth and the hum of cicadas rising from the soaked fields. The house was quiet, except for the soft creak of the old wood floors beneath my bare feet. Mama used to say every storm takes something with it. It's up to you whether you let it take your peace or your pain. I didn't know which one I was ready to lose. I packed the tin box into my bag and drove down to the river road. The path was muddy, the trees bending low like they were listening. When I stepped out, the air was thick and warm, carrying that heavy scent of pine and mud. I hadn't been to the riverbank in years, not since Mama's funeral. Back then, the water had been high and brown, the reflection too restless to look into for long. But today it moved slow, almost still, as if waiting. The old oak tree stood just where Thelma said it would. Its roots crawled over the ground like old hands, clutching the earth. Beneath it, the soil was darker, wetter, and there, half buried in moss, was a flat stone marker, edges worn smooth by years of rain. I knelt beside it, brushing away the dirt. The engraving was faint, but I could still make out the name, James H. Walker, 1949-1982. My breath caught. My uncle, the man Mama never spoke of except in vague fragments. He left. He couldn't stay. He made his choices. But he hadn't left. He'd been here the whole time. I sat there for a long while, just staring. Birds called from the trees, and the water lapped softly against the bank. I opened the tin box and took out one of the letters, the one written in Mama's hand. The ink was faded,
but her voice came alive in my head, that soft drawl that always carried strength beneath it. James, if you ever see this, I tried to do right by her. She's got your eyes, your way of asking questions that dig too deep, but I couldn't let her know. I couldn't let her carry what we did. You said you'd come back, but I think we both knew you wouldn't, so I'll carry it for the both of us. My heart clenched. The words blurred from my tears. She wasn't protecting just me. She was protecting him too. Protecting everyone. Then I noticed something strange. A small rusted locket taped to the back of the letter. I peeled it off gently. Inside was a faded photo. Mama and James, standing by the porch, both smiling like life hadn't yet turned cruel. Behind them, my father's shadow was just visible in the window. The air shifted. A breeze stirred the leaves overhead, whispering through the branches. I heard a twig snap behind me. "Didn't expect to see you here," a voice said. I turned and froze. It was Harlan. My cousin, James's son. I hadn't seen him since we were kids. He was taller now, his face older, eyes darker, but the resemblance was there, that same quiet fire I'd always seen in Mama's brother. "I didn't think anyone else even knew about this place," I said. He shrugged, rainwater still dripping from his hair. "Been coming here since I was 15. My mama used to bring me when she was still alive. Said Uncle James was wronged, that our family buried him twice, once in the ground and once in silence." He looked at the tin box in my lap. "Guess you found the same truth I did." My pulse quickened. "You knew?" "Not all of it. Just enough to know your daddy did something bad. But I never knew Aunt Loretta helped hide it." The pain in his eyes twisted my stomach. "She did it for you. For me. She was trying to protect what was left." "Protect?" His voice rose, bitter. "From what? From the truth? From what they did to my daddy? You call that protection?" I didn't have an answer. Harlan stepped closer. "All these years, my mama died thinking nobody cared about what happened to him. I used to hate your side of the family, Renee, but now I see it was all lies. Just layer after layer to keep up a story that shouldn't have been told." He knelt down beside the grave, his hand trembling as he traced the carved letters. "They could have just told the truth," he whispered. I nodded slowly. Maybe they couldn't live with it. He looked at me then, his eyes softer. "Maybe you and me can." We sat there in silence, two broken branches from the same tree, staring at the ground that held all our family's sins. Then Harlan said quietly, "There's something else you should see." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was yellowed with age, edges curled. He handed it to me. I unfolded it carefully. It was a deed, the same one Thelma had mentioned, only this one had a second signature at the bottom, in my mama's handwriting. She transferred the land to me a month before she passed. Said it was time it went back to the bloodline that deserved it. My chest tightened. "She knew you'd come?" He nodded. "Said if I waited long enough, you'd find the letters, that you'd understand." The wind rustled again, carrying the faint scent of magnolia and rain. For the first time since I came back, I didn't feel lost. I felt placed, like I was standing where I was always meant to, between the truth and the forgiveness that had taken generations to find. Harlan looked toward the horizon. "You think we can start over?" I glanced at the river, at the reflection of the oak tree shimmering across its surface. "We can try, but we'll do it honest this time." The sun began to break through the clouds, streaking the water with gold. For the first time in decades, maybe that old land wasn't cursed anymore. It was finally free.
By the time I drove back to the house, dusk had already swallowed the horizon. The air was thick with the scent of wet soil and old wood. I left my boots by the door and stood in the quiet, looking around the living room, the same room where Mama used to sew while the TV murmured in the background, where laughter had once felt permanent. Now it felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by truth. The old floorboards creaked beneath me as I walked toward the porch door. Every sound carried memory, a slammed door, a whispered argument, a lullaby hummed too softly to reach anyone but God. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing James's name etched into that stone, the letters Mama wrote, Harlan's face when he said, "They buried him twice." The rain started again, Tapping lightly on the tin roof, I found myself sitting on the floor, tracing my hand along the uneven boards beneath the sofa. The ones I'd noticed were slightly loose when I first returned home. That's when I heard it, a faint, hollow sound beneath my touch. I froze. It was right under where Mama's rocking chair used to sit. I grabbed a flashlight and fetched a small screwdriver from the kitchen drawer. Carefully, I pried the first board loose. Beneath it lay a small space packed with dust, cobwebs, and one old wooden box. My breath caught. It was different from the tin box. Older, carved with initials, J.W., James Walker. The latch was rusted, but gave way easily. Inside were letters, yes, but also photos, receipts, and one folded newspaper clipping from 1982. The headline read, "Local man missing after confrontation near Hayes Farm." I read on, heart pounding. The article said James Walker had been accused of stealing from his brother-in-law, my father, and fled town after a fight. His car was later found abandoned by the river, except he hadn't fled. He'd been buried. The photos told a story words couldn't. One showed James standing beside my father, both smiling, too tight, too false. Another showed Mama holding baby me, with James's hand resting gently on my shoulder. There was tenderness in his eyes, the kind that doesn't come from a distant uncle. And then the last photo, a faded Polaroid, its edges torn. My father standing on the porch, holding a shovel, the magnolia tree behind him, newly planted. I covered my mouth. That's where they buried him first. A tremor ran through me as realization settled. Mama hadn't just been protecting James. She was protecting me from knowing who my father truly was. The air felt tight, closing in around me. I could almost hear Mama's voice whispering, "Not every truth sets you free, baby. Some truths burn." But I couldn't stop now. I reached deeper into the box and found one more envelope, sealed and addressed in Mama's handwriting. "To Renee, when you're ready." My hand shook as I opened it. "You'll find this when you're grown enough to carry the truth without letting it crush you. I did what I did because love don't always look clean. It don't always come wrapped in the right kind of choices. Your daddy was a man who couldn't forgive, and your uncle was a man who couldn't stop trying to make peace. They both broke, and I got caught between their breaking. If you ever find Harlan, tell him I never meant for the silence to last this long. Tell him the land was never cursed. It was just waiting for somebody to love it honest again." The words blurred as I read them through tears. I could see her sitting at the same kitchen table writing by candlelight, her hand shaking as she sealed it, knowing someday I'd dig through all her lies just to find her truth. I stayed there on the floor for hours, surrounded by the evidence of generations who had loved too hard and forgiven too late. The flashlight flickered, shadows dancing across the walls. Then I heard a soft knock at the door. I stood, startled, and opened it, and there was Harlan. He held a lantern, its glow casting gold across his face. Couldn't sleep. Thought maybe you couldn't either. I stepped aside and let him in. He took in the open floorboards, the papers spread across the floor. "You found something else?" "Yeah," I whispered. "Everything." He knelt beside the box, eyes scanning the photos. When he reached the one of James and my father, his jaw tightened. "He told me my daddy died trying to protect someone. Now I know who." We sat there in silence. The rain beat harder outside, a rhythmic thrum like a heartbeat. Guess the porch really was holding secrets. Harlan said softly. "Letters, truth, maybe forgiveness too," I said, managing a small smile through my tears. He looked at me then, not with anger, but something gentler. "Loretta raised you right. She just couldn't tell you everything. I think she hoped we'd tell each other," I said. He nodded slowly. "Then maybe we start now." We sat together through the night, piecing through the fragments of our shared history, building something new out of what was broken. By the time dawn broke, the rain had stopped. A single ray of sunlight filtered through the window, falling across Mama's last letter. The words glowed like a promise. "Love it honest again." I looked at Harlan. "We'll try." He smiled faintly. "We already are." Outside, the magnolia leaves shimmered with dew, the land finally breathing again, alive, waiting, forgiven. When the first light spilled across Mama's porch, it felt like the house itself had taken a deep breath for the first time in years. The air was clean, soft with mist, and the magnolia tree shimmered with dew like it had been washed of every lie I'd ever listened to. I stood at the kitchen window, my hand wrapped around a mug of coffee, watching the sunrise spread gold over the wet grass. Harlan was still asleep in the living room, slumped in Daddy's old armchair, his hat tilted low over his face. For a long time, I just watched him, the way his chest rose and fell steady, the peace that had replaced the anger he'd carried when he first came here. It was strange how truth could hurt and heal at the same time, how it could split open everything you thought you knew, but still leave room for something new to grow. When Harlan finally stirred, I poured him a cup of coffee and slid it across the table. He smiled. That quiet kind of smile that didn't need words. "Did you sleep?" I asked. "Like a man who finally stopped running," he said, rubbing his eyes. "You?" "Barely. My mind wouldn't stop turning." He took a long sip. "What's next for you, Renee?" I looked toward the porch, the boards still lifted where we found the box. I think I need to stop hiding in this house. Mama spent her life covering for the men she loved. I've been doing the same thing in my own way. Staying quiet, pretending peace. "You've been raising your daughter," he said softly. "I've been raising her in silence." I corrected. "Alana doesn't know the truth about any of this, about me, about Mama, about what really happened. I thought I was protecting her, but maybe I was just keeping her from understanding who she is." He nodded. "You gonna tell her?" "I have to, but I want her to see what strength looks like first. Not from a woman pretending everything's fine, from a woman who knows how to stand in her truth." Harlan looked out toward the magnolia. "Loretta would have liked that." We spent that morning clearing the living room, folding Mama's dresses and boxing up her things. Every time I lifted one, the fabrics whispered something old. Forgiveness, regret, pride. Each one felt lighter than I remembered. As I worked, I found Mama's Bible on the dresser, its pages swollen from years of humidity. A slip of paper fell out. It was another note, written in her looping hand. "You ain't meant to carry everything, baby. Just what you can turn into love." I pressed the note to my chest and felt the weight shift inside me. Later that day, Alana came downstairs, still half asleep, her curls wild. "What's going on? Why's the house look like y'all moving out?" "Not moving," I said, smiling faintly. "Just making space." "For what?" "For truth." She looked confused, then wary. "You sound like Grandma." I laughed softly. Maybe I finally understand her. Alana wandered to the porch, picking up one of Mama's hats from the chair. "I used to think she was scary," she said. She was, but not for the reasons we thought. Alana tilted her head. "What do you mean?" I hesitated, the words heavy on my tongue. She was trying to protect us from a story that could have broken this family apart. Like, what story? The kind we'll talk about tonight, when the sun goes down and the day is quiet again. Alana rolled her eyes, but smiled, her youth flashing in the gesture. "You're being dramatic, Mama." "Maybe, but this story deserves drama." She laughed and headed for the kitchen. I stayed on the porch, watching the wind move through the magnolia leaves. Harlan came to stand beside me, his arms crossed, his gaze thoughtful. "You think she's ready to hear it?" I said, "She's young, but she's my daughter. That means she's strong enough to hear it." He nodded slowly. "You remind me of Loretta when you say things like that." I smiled. Then maybe that's a blessing after all. We spent there a long time, the two of us, children of the same secret, both trying to find a way to live past it. The sun broke fully over the trees, lighting the yard in that bright, forgiving gold. And I thought of Mama, somewhere beyond this world, smiling with that tired grace she always carried, the kind that knew sorrow but never surrendered to it. "Thank you," I whispered to the sky. For once, the silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt answered. The truth hadn't ruined us. It had rewritten us, and I knew this was only the beginning of what healing looked like. By dusk, the house had gone quiet in that way southern nights often do, like even the crickets were holding their breath. The rain smells still lingered from the storm the day before, sweet and earthy, mixing with the scent of fried catfish and collard greens drifting from the kitchen. Harlan sat on the porch steps, elbows resting on his knees, staring out at the horizon. The last of the sunlight burned orange behind the trees, catching on the old wind chimes Mama had hung years ago. They tinkled softly, just enough to fill the silence. Inside, I lit a single candle on the kitchen table, the same way Mama used to when she wanted us to listen.
Really listen. Alana came downstairs, her face half lit by the glow, curiosity sparking in her eyes. You look like you're about to tell a ghost story, she teased. In a way, I am, I said, but the ghosts are real people, our people. She sat across from me, folding her legs under her chair, her phone abandoned for once. That alone felt like a small miracle. Harlan came in quietly and leaned against the counter. You ready for me? He asked. As I'll ever be. I reached beneath the table and pulled out the wooden box we'd found under the porch. It still smelled faintly of dust and pine. Alana leaned forward. What's that? This, I said slowly, is a piece of our family history. One that was buried before I was even born. She frowned. Why was it buried? Because sometimes, I said softly, the truth hurts so much that love tries to hide it. Harlan nodded, his jaw tight. Loretta, your grandma, was protecting her brother, protecting me. Alana blinked. Wait, Uncle Harlan? Grandma's brother? I nodded. She told everyone he left town on his own, but the truth was, something happened that night after the argument with their father. It broke her heart, and she spent the rest of her life keeping it from tearing the rest of us apart. Alana's brows furrowed. What happened? I looked down at the letters spread across the table. There was a fire, an accident. Their father was drunk, angry. Harlan tried to protect her, but when it was over, he ran. Mama told everyone he left because he couldn't stand his father's rules, but the truth was, she helped him escape. She took the blame for everything that went wrong in that house. Alana stared between us. So, Grandma lied? She loved. I corrected gently. Love can look like a lie when you don't understand the weight behind it. She was quiet for a long moment. And you never knew until now? I never wanted to know, I admitted. I thought it was better to leave old pain buried, but then I found the letters and I realized truth doesn't stay buried. It grows roots. Harlan's eyes shimmered with memory. Loretta wrote me every week for a year after I left. Told me she'd keep my name clean, that she'd pray for me every night. I stopped writing back when I thought my silence would give her peace. Alana's voice was small. And now you're back? He smiled sadly. Now I'm back. The candle flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. For a moment, I saw Mama's face in those shifting shapes. Stern, loving, tired. I wonder what she'd think of us now. Sitting here with her truth laid bare, Alana reached across the table and touched my hand. It's weird, she whispered. I always thought Grandma was the strict, scary woman, but now I kind of get her. She carried everything so we wouldn't have to, and I think she'd be proud that we're finally strong enough to carry it together. Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance, a leftover echo from yesterday's storm. Harlan went to the porch and looked out into the darkness. You ever think about leaving this house? He asked me quietly. I thought about it. The porch floorboards, the letters, the magnolia tree glowing silver in the moonlight. I used to, I said. But now, I think I'm meant to stay here. Not because I'm trapped here, but because I finally know what this place means. He smiled sadly. Loretta would have liked that answer. Alana followed my gaze to the porch, where the candlelight flickered through the screen door, painting our faces in gold. You know what I think? She said softly. What, baby? I think Grandma would want us to keep writing. I blinked. Writing what? New letters, she said, grinning faintly. Ones that tell the truth. Her words settled deep in me, sweet and solid. I looked at the box again, then at the girl across from me, young, brave, her eyes bright with understanding. And I realized the cycle had finally broken. For the first time in years, our house didn't feel haunted. It felt alive. And as the candle burned lower, I whispered a thank you. To Mama, to truth, to forgiveness. Because some stories are written in ink, but the ones that save you are written in love.
The next morning, sunlight poured through the thin lace curtains like melted gold, scattering patterns across the kitchen walls. The house smelled like fresh cornbread, and for the first time in a long while, it didn't feel heavy. It felt like the air could breathe again. I sat at the same kitchen table where Mama had written her prayers and secrets. The box still sat in the center, open now, not hidden away, its letters neatly stacked like sacred scripture. Alana came in wearing her pink robe, her curls pulled up into a bun. You're up early, she said, yawning. Couldn't sleep. My mind's been running all night. She poured herself some orange juice and sat across from me. What are you thinking about? About what you said last night, I answered softly. About writing new letters. Her eyebrows lifted. You really like that idea? I did, I said. I think that's what Mama was trying to do all along.
write her truth in the only way she could. Maybe it's time we write ours too. Just then, Harlan walked in, holding his hat in his hands like it carried 1,000 miles of history. "You two been up talking already?" "Just planning," I said. "We're going to start writing." He grinned a little. "Well, look at y'all. Writers in the family now." "Maybe it's time," I said, sliding a fresh notebook across the table. "Loretta started this story. Let's finish it." Harlan sat down slowly, running his fingers across the pages. "What do we say?" I smiled faintly. "Whatever needs to be said." For a moment, no one spoke. The house seemed to hold its breath again, but this time it wasn't grief. It was anticipation. Alana uncapped a pen and began to write first, her handwriting small and quick. I didn't read over her shoulder, but I saw the tremor in her fingers and the way her lips pressed together as she thought. When she was done, she passed the page to me. It read, "Dear Grandma Loretta, I used to think you were too hard on Mama. I used to think you didn't care about me, but now I see you were trying to hold something too heavy for one person. I'm sorry we didn't see it sooner. Thank you for keeping us safe, even from the truth. Love, Alana." I couldn't stop the tears that welled up. I wiped them quickly before they could fall on the paper. Then I took up my own pen and wrote, "Dear Mama, you were right. The past doesn't disappear. It waits. It waited until I was strong enough to look at it without running. You carried pain and called it love. Now it's my turn to carry love and call it healing. Renee." I passed the notebook to Harlan. He stared at it for a long time before writing slowly, his hands steady but trembling at the edges. "Loretta, you gave me my life twice. Once when you protected me, and again when you forgave me. I'm sorry I stayed gone so long. I hope the Lord let you rest easy. I'm home now. I'll take care of them like you always did. Your brother, Harlan." When he was done, we just sat there, the three of us, with sunlight painting our faces and silence filling the spaces between our breaths. Then Alana said softly, "What do we do with them?" "Bury them," I said. She looked startled. "Like grandma's?" I nodded. "Not to hide them, to plant them." We went out to the porch, the air warm and humming with cicadas. The magnolia tree stood tall beside the steps, its leaves glossy with light. I knelt beside the floorboards where the old letters had been buried and began to dig a small hole in the dirt beneath. Alana placed her letter first, then Harlan's, then mine. Together we covered them with earth, pressing it down gently. When we stood, I whispered, "Let them rest." Alana slipped her arm around my waist. "You think she can hear us?" I smiled through the ache in my chest. "I think she's been listening this whole time." For a long moment, we stood in silence, the wind moving through the magnolia branches, scattering a few petals that landed right over where we'd buried the letters. And in that golden morning air, I realized something. The porch that once hid our pain had become our altar. The same ground that held secrets now held our truth. Later that afternoon, the three of us sat together on the porch swing, watching neighbors pass by. It felt strange, but good. Seeing people, smiling, not hiding. Miss Thelma from down the street waved her fan at us. "Y'all look different today," she said with a grin. "We feel different." Harlan lobbed quietly, tipping his hat. Loretta would be proud of this porch finally holding something good.
That night, I sat on the porch alone after Alana and Harlan went to bed. The crickets hummed their slow, steady rhythm, and the wind carried the faint scent of honeysuckle from down the road. The house was quiet again, but this time, it wasn't the kind of quiet that haunted. It was the kind that held you. I traced my fingers along the wooden planks beneath me, feeling every groove, every weathered scar. Somewhere under these boards, generations had buried their words, pain, regret, forgiveness, and yet somehow this place still stood, still strong, still ours. The porch light flickered slightly, its glow soft and amber. Mama used to say that porch lights were prayers for the living. We don't turn them on for decoration.
she'd tell me. We keep them on so the ones we love always know where home is. I leaned back in the chair and whispered, "The light's still on, Mama." A low rumble of thunder echoed in the distance, and the air grew thick with that sweet, heavy smell that always comes before southern rain. The world felt suspended in that in-between, not quite storm, not quite calm. And in that quiet, I began to speak, not to anyone visible, not even to myself exactly, but to every woman who had ever loved too hard, lost too deep, and kept moving anyway. "Mama," I said softly, "I used to think your silence was weakness, but now I know it was your armor. You didn't speak because you were trying to protect everyone else from what you already knew. I hated you for that for a long time. But tonight, I just want to say thank you." The thunder rolled closer. I closed my eyes and let the first drops of rain hit my skin. They were warm, gentle, like a blessing. Inside, I could hear Alana turning in her sleep, a soft murmur from her room. I thought about her, how she had grown so quickly into a woman who reminded me of both her grandmother and myself. Stubborn, brilliant, and full of a fire that refused to go out. Harlan's old truck sat parked in the driveway, a little rusted, but still strong. He'd spent the afternoon talking about fixing up the shed, turning it into a place to paint. He said he wanted to capture all this redemption in color. I told him I'd help him pick the shades. I smiled now, thinking of how strange and beautiful life could be, how something broken could mend itself if you were brave enough to face the cracks. The rain began to fall harder, tapping rhythmically on the roof, soaking the porch in silver streaks. I stood and walked out to the edge, barefoot, letting the water soak my nightgown. The magnolia tree shimmered in the storm, its flowers shining like little moons. It was then that I heard it. Not a voice exactly, but a feeling, deep and familiar, like the memory of a hand on my back when I was little. "You did good, baby girl." I gasped quietly, tears mixing with rain. "Is that you, Mama?" I whispered, though I already knew. The wind rustled through the branches, soft and sure, and I knew she was there, not as a ghost, but as something quieter, a peace that had finally settled into the bones of this house. I sat back down, clutching my old shawl around my shoulders. Across the street, a neighbor's porch light flicked on, then another. One by one, small glows bloomed in the darkness, like a constellation of homes, each one holding its own stories of sorrow and grace. I realized then, this is how women survive down here. We kept our lights on. We carried our secrets and our strength in equal measure, and when one of us was ready to lay her burden down, another picked it up and turned it into wisdom. When the rain slowed, I looked up at the night sky. The clouds had cleared enough for a few stars to peek through, shimmering faintly above the magnolia tree. That's when Alana came to the door, rubbing her eyes. "Mama, you okay?" I smiled at her. That soft, tired smile that Mama used to give me. "Yeah, baby, just thinking." She stepped onto the porch, barefoot like me. The rain had left the boards slick and shining. She wrapped her arm through mine and leaned her head against my shoulder. "I had a dream," she said sleepily. "I was little again, and Grandma Loretta was sitting right here. She said something to me, but I can't remember what. What did it feel like?" I asked. "It like she was saying goodbye," she murmured, "but not sad, like she was letting us go." I swallowed the lump in my throat and kissed her forehead. Then that's exactly what it was. We sat together in silence, the night air cool and sweet. The porch light hummed above us, steady and bright. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what was buried. The letters beneath the porch weren't secrets anymore. They were roots, and like any good roots, they had done their work quietly, pushing us toward the light. As the last of the rain fell and the magnolia petals drifted down onto the porch steps, I whispered to myself, "We're free now." And from somewhere deep in the earth, I swore I could feel Mama smile.
The next morning, sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, soft and forgiving after the storm. The smell of wet earth drifted in from outside, mingling with the scent of coffee brewing on the stove. The air carried that rare kind of quiet that only comes after something has finally broken open and healed. I stood at the counter, flipping through the stack of old letters I had found under the porch. The paper was thin, yellowed around the edges, and the handwriting wavered, elegant but tired. Most of the letters were from my grandmother, Lorella, to my mother, but this one was different. The last envelope didn't bear a return address, just one word written across it in faded blue ink, daughter. My hands trembled a little as I slid my finger under the flap. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly, the ink barely legible in spots where time had worn it thin. My dearest Evelyn, if you're reading this, it means the truth has found its way home. I never meant to keep it from you forever. I only meant to keep you safe from the kind of anger that eats at a person's soul. Your father didn't leave because he stopped loving us. He left because I asked him to. And I asked him to because your uncle had taken something from this family that could never be returned. I couldn't bear to let you grow up in a house full of men's shame and silence. So I told your father to go before you learned what kind of betrayal this was. You always looked at me like I was made of stone. But baby, I was just trying to keep you whole. And if there's one thing I hope you've learned by now, it's this: silence may protect, but it can also imprison. Don't let it keep you. Your truth will heal this family one day. When you find it, let it breathe, let it live, let it forgive. Love always, Mama. By the time I reached the end, my hands were shaking. I pressed the paper against my chest and exhaled a long, trembling breath that felt like it had been waiting half a lifetime to escape. All those years, thinking my mother was cold, heartless, incapable of love, and it was love that had driven every move of hers. A fierce, flawed, desperate love. I felt something break open in me then. Something I didn't even know was still locked away. When Alana came down the stairs, rubbing sleep from her eyes, she found me at the kitchen table, tears slipping silently down my cheeks. Mama? I smiled through it. Morning, baby. She frowned, glancing at the letter. Is that one of Grandma's? Yes, I said softly. The last one. She sat beside me, her dark curls falling over her face. I could see the worry in her eyes, the kind of worry that comes from watching your mother cry and not knowing if it's good or bad. I reached over and took her hand. She was trying to protect us, baby. Protect all of us. She didn't mean for it to feel like a cage. Alana nodded slowly. She sounds a lot like you. That made me laugh. A real deep laugh that shook something loose inside. Lord, don't tell me that. But she smiled. No, Mama. I mean it. You always say things you don't want to say just to keep everyone else safe. Grandma did the same thing. Guess that runs in the family. I looked at her then, really looked at her strong jawline, the curve of her shoulders, the quiet confidence in the way she held herself. My baby girl had grown into a woman who carried every woman before her, all their secrets, all their strength, all their light. I said softly, maybe it's time we stop doing that. Stop carrying silence like it's something sacred. Alana leaned her head on my shoulder. Then let's start today. The clock ticked quietly in the background. Outside, the sun broke through the last remnants of gray clouds, scattering gold light over the magnolia tree. Its blossoms were full again, heavy with rain and life. That afternoon, we buried the letters in the garden under that same tree. I didn't want them hidden anymore, but I didn't want them gone either. They deserved to rest, not rot. As the soil covered the last of the envelopes, I whispered, "Thank you, Mama, for keeping us even when I didn't understand. Alana stood beside me, silent but steady, her hand gripping mine. I could feel her strength pulsing through her fingers, the kind of strength that doesn't come from fighting, but from surviving. We didn't say much else. We didn't need to. The air around us felt different, lighter somehow, like the land itself had exhaled. Later that evening, when the sun began to set, I sat again on that porch, the same spot where Mama had once rocked me to sleep, where I had cried over loss, and where I had found forgiveness. I thought about how every family has its own kind of buried truth, and how maybe the real betrayal isn't in what's hidden, but in never trying to understand why it was hidden at all. As I rocked gently, the porch light flickered on by itself. I smiled and whispered, "I see you, Mama." And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel haunted by the past. I felt held by it. The night came on slow, the sky washed in shades of lavender and gold that melted into deep indigo over Baton Rouge. Crickets hummed in the tall grass, and somewhere far off, someone's radio played an old Al Green song, the kind that sounded like love and sorrow stitched into one. I sat on that porch swing, Mama's old swing, the boards creaking softly beneath me. For the first time in years, my heart didn't feel like it was carrying a secret. Alana joined me quietly, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She leaned against me and I could smell the coconut oil in her hair, sweet and familiar, like my own childhood. We watched the lightning bugs drift through the humid air, their glow pulsing in the dusk like small promises. "Mama," she said after a while, "do you think Grandma knew we'd find those letters?" I smiled faintly. "Oh, I think she counted on it. Loretta May never did anything by accident." She laughed softly. "You talk about her like she's still here." "She is," I said simply, "just not the way she used to be." The porch light flickered once, then steadied. I looked up at it and felt that familiar warmth in my chest. Not grief, not regret, but something deeper. Gratitude, maybe, or peace. There had been so many years when I'd blamed my mother for everything that went wrong. For Daddy's leaving, for the silence that swallowed our home, for the way I learned to hold my tongue when my heart was on fire. But reading those letters had shifted something permanent inside me. Mama hadn't been cruel. She had been afraid that the truth would tear her child apart the same way it had torn her. And maybe that was love too. Messy, flawed, and misunderstood, but love all the same. I turned to Alana quietly, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She leaned against me and I could smell the coconut oil in her hair. Sweet and familiar, like my own childhood. We watched the lightning bugs drift through the humid air, their glow pulsing in the dusk like small promises. "Mama," she said after a while, "do you think Grandma knew we'd find those letters?" I smiled faintly. "Oh, I think she counted on it. Loretta May never did anything by accident." She laughed softly. "You talk about her like she's still here." "She is," I said simply, "just not the way she used to be." The porch light flickered once, then steadied. I looked up at it and felt that familiar warmth in my chest. Not grief, not regret, but something deeper. Gratitude, maybe? Or peace. There have been so many years when I blamed my mother for everything that went wrong. For Daddy's leaving, for the silence that swallowed our home, for the way I learned to hold my tongue when my heart was on fire. But reading those letters had shifted something permanent inside me. Mama hadn't been cruel. She had been afraid that the truth would tear her child apart the same way it had torn her. And maybe that was love too. Messy, flawed, and misunderstood, but love all the same. I turned to Alana. "You know, baby, when I was your age, I used to think being strong meant keeping everything to yourself, never letting anyone see you break." She glanced at me, her brown eyes glinting in the dim light. "That's not true?" I shook my head. "No, being strong is telling the truth even when it hurts. It's standing in the middle of your own pain and saying, 'This is mine, but it doesn't have to own me.'" She nodded slowly, thinking it over. "So we tell the truth even when it's ugly, especially then. For a long time, we just sat there, the air sick with summer and forgiveness. Somewhere in the house, the clock chimed 9. The magnolia tree out front swayed gently, its blossoms glowing white under the porch light. I thought about those dresses still hanging in Mama's closet, the ones I hadn't been able to pack away. Each one felt different now. Not heavy, not haunted, just hers. "Tomorrow," I said, "we'll take Mama's dresses to the church. The women's center could use them." She'd like that. Yeah, she would. I felt her rest her head against my shoulder again, and I reached over to squeeze her hand. It was warm and sure. the kind of touch that anchors you when the world feels uncertain. As the night deepened, I closed my eyes and listened to the rhythm of the crickets, the whisper of the wind through the trees, the soft breath of my daughter beside me. Every sound felt like part of a prayer, one I hadn't realized I'd been saying for years. When I opened my eyes again, I saw the moon slipping out from behind a thin veil of clouds, casting a silvery glow across the porch. It lit up the old wood, the chipped paint, and the faded swing that had carried generations of our family stories. I whispered, "We're all right now, Mama. You can rest." And in that moment, I swear I felt her there. Not in the shadows, but in the light. The next morning, the house smelled like coffee and hope. Alana helped me fold the dresses one by one, her movements gentle, almost reverent. Each piece of fabric held a memory, a moment, a lesson. And as we packed them into a box, I realized we weren't just letting go of her things, we were carrying her love forward. Before we left, I found one last folded handkerchief in the dresser drawer. Embroidered along the edge in faded blue thread were the words, "Keep living." I smiled. "Yes, ma'am. That's exactly what we're going to do." We loaded the box into the car, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the pull of guilt or the weight of what was left unsaid. I just felt ready for the next chapter, for forgiveness that didn't erase the past, but honored it. As I pulled down the driveway, Alana rolled down her window, letting the morning wind rush in. "Mama, you think our grandma is proud of us?" I glanced at her, my heart full. "Baby, I think she's smiling wider than heaven itself right now." The magnolia tree swayed in the rearview mirror, its petals catching the sun. And for a fleeting second, I saw the silhouette of a woman standing beneath it. Silver hair, white dress, hands folded in peace. Then she was gone, and all that was left was light.